This program is the third in a series that focuses on the Evergreen State College. 2 weeks ago, Dean Marcia Tate Arunga, the Dean of the Evergreen State College, Tacoma campus, joined us to talk about herself and a bit of her work. Last week, we were joined by the indomitable Gilda Shepherd, creative and filmmaker and teacher extraordinaire. And this week, I have the privilege of talking with you about my time thus far at the Evergreen State College. And at this point, I'm going to ask Eve if she would volunteer to do for us the job that she did last week. That is, to help us manage questions and talk back afterwards. And I'm asking Eve in part because she did a fabulous job last week, but also because of the conversation members present, Eve and I go farthest back. So it would be most appropriate for Eve to do that. So I thought about how to share with you today, and I decided I'm going to go sort of partway between personal storytelling and telling you about my work at Evergreen. So if you're interested in either, after I provide a sort of summary story, I'm open to your probes and questions in any of these areas. So what I want to do with this session then is to tell you a little bit about me and about how I came to be in the position I'm in now and what all of that has meant. Okay, just checking that my systems work here. So you're looking at my first photograph at the Evergreen State College. And I wanted to invite you into that smile and what it means. What it means is that I was really, really happy to be at Evergreen. I came to the Pacific Northwest in 2002 on an invitation to join the faculty at the University of Puget Sound. I had been invited before to share a lecture on 2 campuses, having met 2 professors from the Pacific Northwest, Professor Susan Owen and her spouse, Professor Peter Ehrenhaus. Susan Owen was a professor, now retired, both of them now retired. Susan Owen was at the University of Puget Sound, and Peter Ehrenhaus was at Pacific Lutheran University. I was invited to deliver a lecture on each campus because the week before 9/11, I had met Peter and Suzanne at a conference on the campus of Indiana University in Bloomington. And we were exploring the question of trauma. And it turns out that they were presenting on lynching photographs, and I was presenting on lynching. And once we heard each other, we exchanged notes and said, I gotta have you on my campus, I gotta have you on my campus. And so I invited them to my campus, which was then the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And I taught at Tuscaloosa from 1997 to 2002. And then they invited me here to teach a class at the University of Puget Sound and another at PLU, and to deliver a public lecture. Having delivered the public lecture, I was invited to talk with the dean of the faculty, who indicated to me that they were interested in asking whether I would consider taking a job at the University of Puget Sound. At the time, I was in the middle of taking a job. In fact, I had taken a job at the University of Iowa. I was moving from the University of Alabama. I'd visited Iowa 5 times, and we were having trouble finding housing close enough to the university with a school for our 5-year-old at the time. And so after I considered the invitation from the dean of the faculty, I said, well, I might think about it. I've got to talk to my family, and I've got to talk to the people at the University of Iowa. The main attraction to me, one, I was ready to leave the University of Alabama, and 2, I had been torn between wanting to get a better balance between teaching and research, because the challenge at Research One universities was that, as the Boyer report of 1997 stated, that students on the campuses of the big universities, undergraduate students, were feeling lost, feeling like they didn't belong because the universities were too large, they didn't have a sense of community, and they didn't feel like they were really learning. They learned from graduate students who are often really on the cutting edge, which is great. But a problem with that was that students were not getting to engage with faculty, and they were often in these large lecture halls. So the recommendation of the Boyer Commission was that universities needed to find ways to create smaller communities so people could have a sense of belonging, and undergraduates could feel like they're part of the priority of the university. So I was in the middle of looking out for that. The part of my job that I enjoyed most at the University of Alabama was taking students, undergraduate and graduate students, on study abroad programs. So when I came to the Pacific Northwest, I was attracted to the idea of a smaller liberal arts college, and I was completely taken by the beauty of the place. I'd been to the Pacific Northwest only once before, when I came to interview for a job at UW Seattle. And when I got here, I said to myself, wow, the place really exists. What did I mean by that? My time in the United States, I was really struggling with the place, especially having lived in the Midwest, where I couldn't find a mountain to save my life, nor could I find a body of water without driving to go search for it. See, I grew up with the mountains on one side and the sea on the other side, and I realized I needed that for my soul. I needed water. I grew up literally within smelling distance. I could smell the ocean. I could walk to it in 5 minutes. And when I came and saw Seattle, the bodies of water, the mountains, I said, the place exists in the United States. And this is the kind of place I could live if I was going to live here. So when I came out to Tacoma, that was the striking feature for me. And by the way, I got the job at UW Seattle. Again, the challenge was on the salary they were offering, I couldn't afford housing close to the university. And the recommendation was that I could live in one of the one of the bedroom communities. Um, and it turns out, as I found out later, the colleagues from UW were thinking I could live maybe in somewhere along the I-5 corridor between Seattle and Tacoma. I'm kind of glad that I never took that offer. The University of Alabama came with a much better offer, and that's why I took that offer. The people at UW Seattle were aghast that I would choose the University of Alabama over the vaunted UW Seattle. But my answer was, well, I have to put food on the table for my family. And if I'm interested in studying race, I may as well get an experience of what it's like to live and work in the South. When I asked questions about what it meant to live in the South, people laughed at me. People who knew the South, when I told them I had family in Florida, and they said, "You have no idea what the Deep South is." And they were exactly right. It's a different world. And I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, but it was a brand new experience for me. So I accepted the Alabama job, stayed there for 5 years, and here I was now at the University of Puget Sound. I stayed at the University of Puget Sound for 19 years. I led in the building of the African American Studies program. When I came to Puget Sound, there was not a single course, not one, focusing on African American life. There was an African American Studies minor, which was made up of a collection of courses from English and politics and government and theater and communication studies, courses that referenced race or mentioned race, but none focused on a rigorous study of race or of Black life or of African American life. I developed the first course along with, and then Grace Livingston joined me. I developed the first course in 2002. Grace Livingston joined me in 2003. And from there, we worked together to build the African American Studies program. And 3 Saturdays ago or 2 Saturdays ago, the African American Studies program graduated 17 new graduates. From the time we started having graduation ceremonies in 2003, we have graduated usually anywhere between 12 to 25 students per year. And alongside building African American Studies, after we hired Professor Grace Livingston, then we hired Professor Renee Sims, then we hired Professor Latoya Brackett. Alongside of building African American Studies, we also built the Race and Pedagogy Institute with the Race and Pedagogy National Conferences. They started in 2006. We held them every 4 years, and the last one was 2018. One should have been coming up this fall, 2022, but the dynamics of the relationship with the University of Puget Sound has put that in question. So I left Puget Sound at the end of June, and joined the Evergreen State College August 1. And so I'm approaching the end of the first academic year at Evergreen State College. Um, there is a much longer story about my relationship with the University of Puget Sound, but for now, I will talk about my relationship with the Evergreen State College. I was appointed executive vice president at the Evergreen State College beginning August 1 of last year. And the board's assignment to me was that I would work in partnership with the person you're looking at on my right, who is John Carmichael. John Carmichael is the interim president, and I am executive vice president. And the board's assignment was that together we should provide leadership for the Evergreen State College, leading the college through what is a very challenging period. Our commitment is to bring stability as the first step to stop what's been now an almost 10-year decline in enrollment, and the declines have been heightened, especially in the last 5 years. Evergreen State College is now half of what it was 5 years ago in terms of student enrollment. And the reasons for the decline in enrollment vary. One, there's a national downtrend on campuses across the country. And that downward trend is in part influenced by the fact that there's a smaller number of high school graduates, and that decline is proposed to see perhaps the beginnings of a turnaround in 2029. So that's one. Then there's the decline, which is based on the increasing cost of college, increasing challenge and questions about whether college is the route to social mobility and to better jobs and better life for people. And that comes at a unique time when we're opening access to many who historically have been excluded from this opportunity. And the conundrum we face is that we're inviting a whole new demographic, whole new generations of people to have access to college at the time when the cost of college is increasing and they can ill afford it. So we have a really striking statistic of 40 million people with some college and no degree. And the danger is that we have people from economically challenged circumstances who, with more open access to college now, end up taking on debt. And it's heartbreaking when they take on debt and leave college without a degree. So that's a challenge we have to face. That's one more of the drivers that's suppressing college enrollment. And let me just note that in the midst of that narrative, college remains still the best opportunity for social mobility, for a move upward for families, education in general, but college in particular. Over the life of a college graduate, the data is still clear that the college graduate earns significantly more than someone who does not graduate from college. So we have to, one, make sure we push back against the voices that you hear championing the argument that says college is not for everyone. Now, let me mark that. That is true. College is not for everyone. And what we should be doing is making sure that there is post-high school opportunity, whether college or training, for our students so that they will be prepared. The reason I push back against the argument that college is not for everyone is that you hear it now loudly, and it is often a veiled pushback against the new demographic to which colleges are now open, or to which we have pushed colleges to be open. So we face a situation of continuing decline. Let me talk now about Evergreen itself and about the work.
And Dexter, I just want to add that Norma has just joined us.
Hi, Norma. Welcome. When we get to Q&A section, we'll invite you and your 3 words. And so I'm sharing with you the Evergreen State College's website. And this is the sort of hybrid piece where I indicated to you, I want to talk about Evergreen, and I want to talk about my own story as it relates to Evergreen. One of the reasons I want to make sure I talk about Evergreen is that I want to invite the conversation, and I want to invite anyone who hears me to be a partner with us in helping to grow Evergreen's enrollment. And I'm scrolling through the website here so you get a sense of what Evergreen offers. Evergreen-Tacoma campus we know about, and we can talk about that with your own questions. Native pathways. Once I got to the campus and I saw what's identified as the longhouse at Evergreen and heard the story that Evergreen had the first longhouse on a college campus. And it is a beautiful site, and we must have the conversation out there to visit. Let me just check. Anybody here who has never seen the Evergreen Olympia campus? I want to make sure I can see everyone. Megan, help me. Is there any indication of anyone who is not?
Seeing 2 with raised hands, Peter
Okay.
and I believe Bonita.
Okay, so we'll probably get to some kind of picture here, but
Pam has also raised her hand.
you owe it to yourself, and we owe it to you as a conversation to make a visit to the Evergreen State College Olympia campus. It is really perhaps the most beautiful campus you will see anywhere. And I've been on some beautiful campuses. Indiana University's campus is recognized as one of the world's most beautiful and well-kept campuses. The University of Puget Sound is a beautiful campus. Evergreen State College is nestled in a forest, whereas other campuses have beautiful trees. Evergreen State College is trees. And you walk onto the campus and you get a sense of being in and with nature. The longhouse there is really beautiful, and the history of the longhouse, the fact that this is a program that's been in existence since the early 70s, is something that we should know about. Evergreen has graduate programs, a master's in teaching, master's in public administration. Evergreen graduates, I think, have an outsized presence in public service across the state, especially in government. Evergreen has a robust veterans program. Evergreen works closely with community colleges, and transfer students are an important part of Evergreen. Evergreen's mission is one of the reasons I am really very pleased to be at this university. An innovative public liberal arts college emphasizing collaborative interdisciplinary learning across significant differences. Evergreen engages students in defining and thinking critically about their learning, supports and benefits from local and global commitment to social justice, diversity, environmental stewardship, and service in the public interest. These are explicit and expressed commitments from Evergreen, and I was really, really impressed when I saw these at Evergreen, having been a college professor for over 25 years. And at each of my colleges where I've taught, I've had to function as an activist and as an advocate to get equity and justice acknowledged as an important part of the educational mission of the university. It's been a dogfight at the University of Puget Sound, at the University of Alabama, and to a lesser extent at Indiana University. So when I came to Evergreen and saw those as explicit commitment, I really confirmed that this was home for me. Why confirm? Because in my work in Tacoma over the last 20 years, I've run into Evergreen graduates who have hinted and nudged and suggested that the work I was doing fit well at Evergreen. And Gilda Shepherd was the one who was perhaps most explicit when in 2010, she said to me, Dexter, we're looking for a president and Evergreen seems to be a place for you. And so now looking at experiencing Evergreen for myself and reading the material, it confirms what greeners in the community have demonstrated by their work and have said to me. I want to just mark these issues. There are 6 expectations of an Evergreen graduate. Expectation is that each Evergreen graduate will be able to articulate and assume responsibility for their own work. And there are details to explicate that. Number 2, that each Evergreen graduate will participate collaboratively and responsibly in our diverse society. Number 3, each graduate will communicate creatively and effectively. 4, each graduate will demonstrate integrative, independent, critical thinking. 5, Graduates will apply qualitative, quantitative, and creative modes of inquiry appropriately to practical and theoretical problems across disciplines. And number 6, as a culmination of their education, graduates will demonstrate depth, breadth, and synthesis of learning and the ability to reflect on the personal and social significance of that learning. What I want you to note here in these 6 expectations, Evergreen is explicit in the fact that it is involved in educating people so that they contribute to their society, to their community. So that's the 6 expectations. Then there are 5 foci of learning. We believe the main purpose of the college is to promote student learning through 1, interdisciplinary study, 2, collaborative learning, 3, learning across significant differences, 4, personal engagement, and 5, linking theory with practical application. Why are these important? These are important because Evergreen's commitment to collaborative interdisciplinary learning includes the fact that Evergreen does not offer majors as such, and Evergreen does not organize its study the way almost all other colleges do. So you study at Evergreen in a way that crosses disciplines. And we have 12 or 13 paths of study. And these paths of study are meant to reflect the way we live and work in society. We don't live and work exclusively in one discipline or another. We don't only use quantitative reasoning, or we don't only use qualitative reasoning. We also every day are involved in creative thinking. We're engaged with the artistic realities of our lives. So Evergreen organizes its education the way people live and experience the world. But that is a challenge which has to be explained because students come out of high school expecting to be told that they can take psychology, or they can take biology, or they can take math. At Evergreen, they're likely to be taking math and art and politics as part of a coordinated path of study. And I find that very exciting. It's also challenging because one of the assignments that I now have along with my colleagues is how do we communicate to these new demographics, especially these who are first generation, sometimes first generation like me, first generation high school, first generation college. How do we communicate to them that college is a way to be equipped to provide service and leadership to your community, but college also provides you with the resources to help to provide for your family. And if those first generation college students are anything like me, you go to college, your family is looking to you to help with the economic challenges. So the reality of education in America is that Black and Brown college students are often sent to college by families and friends collecting their limited earnings and then expecting that person to come out and be a major contributor to families. So those of us who teach in the liberal arts, for example, who when we have been faced with the question, what are you going to do with that? Our parents ask their children, what are you going to do with that degree? We have sometimes glibly said, this is a degree that equips you for life. And that is true. But with certain economic realities, we now have to say, this is a degree that we have to find ways to make sure that the degree does it and that we do it in our conversation, that this is a degree that will equip you to earn a living and make a contribution to the common good or the public good. And that's the commitment that Evergreen maintains. So I want to wrap this up by telling you a little bit about my assignment. As executive vice president, I'm responsible for three major divisions of the college. Enrollment, that includes the Office of the Registrar, Student Financial Services, and admissions. I'm also responsible for inclusive equity and student success, which is the student services part of the college that focuses on ensuring that we create a climate of belonging for all of our students across the board, especially those for whom college is a new experience, being first generation out of their families. And that program includes our TRIO programs, our Upward Bound program, our programs focusing on first generation students, undocumented students, the range of services that any college across the country now has to offer, because we are recognizing more and more that college is as much a socialization institution as it is an academic institution. In other words, those like my last daughter, for example, grew up on college. Well, my children generally, but my last daughter in particular, grew up on college campuses. My first three children grew up on college campuses when I was a student. My last daughter grew up on college campuses when I was a faculty member. I did not visit a college campus until I was an adult. And it's very important that there are services and programs for students who are more like me than perhaps like my children, for whom college is a bemusing entity, and it takes them a while to be comfortable, to know that they belong, to know that it is their right to be able to meet with their professors, to talk with their professors about challenges that they face, to expect to be supported, to expect to be treated as full members of the community. The third area I'm responsible for is marketing and communications, everything to do with internal and external communication, promoting the college and ensuring that Evergreen is publicly present and privately or internally we're communicating with one another. These are three challenging areas because of what the college is coming out of. Because of a major racial incident in 2017, the college faced a major reputational hit. And we are just now getting, especially those who experienced that major hit, to, as we say, lift our heads up once more and step boldly into the public to tell Evergreen's story. And I'll end with this. The narrative I'm developing about Evergreen relates to my thinking about college. And in the United States and perhaps across the world, we've developed a knowledge and a social practice of understanding excellence at the college level to be excellence based on exclusion. So if you look at Harvard, if you look at Stanford, they will boast that their acceptance rate is always under 10%, sometimes under 5%. The truth, though, is that excellence cannot be based on exclusion. What excellence is really based on is that the Ivy League schools and some of the schools with a longer history have a resource base which dwarfs many of the other schools across the country. So Harvard's endowment could buy many, many other colleges many times over. UW, Seattle, by the way, has a massive endowment as well. It's that kind of resource base that allows for those colleges to have top class facilities and top class instruction. I want to be part of building Evergreen into an institution that claims excellence based on inclusion, not exclusion. And Evergreen has a policy of openness, willing to admit almost any student, and then helping that student to move from where they are to the top of where their abilities will take them. This is a major undertaking. It's a major challenge because it runs counter to the status quo, which says that you select the best and the brightest and you educate those and then claim excellence. Evergreen is willing to select students who do not come to us necessarily with the best record. But Evergreen's average age is 27. Evergreen-Tacoma's average age is 37. 20% of Evergreen's students indicate that they have housing challenges. Evergreen easily outranks almost all of our other universities with the presence of a range of student groups, whether it is Latinx students, African American students, Native American students, LGBTQ students, trans students. Evergreen offers a place for all of our students to gain a world-class education through interdisciplinary, collaborative, hands-on experiential learning where students' voices and students' lives are taken seriously. I am thrilled to be part of that experiment, and I invite you to join us. My assignment is to help to grow enrollment. And to do that, I will need as much support as we can get. If we can grow Evergreen's enrollment, make sure the college that we move from stabilization to growth, I believe we can contribute in or continue to contribute in a very significant way to our state and our region. I'll stop with just two observations. One, Evergreen State College received from the legislature $600,000 to develop programs focusing on those who are incarcerated and those who have been incarcerated. There's also $250,000 to work with the Department of Corrections to train their staff. And the Department of Corrections is leaning into the process of transforming the culture of how we treat people who go through the criminal justice system and are incarcerated. And the second thing I want to point to is that Evergreen is developing a professional and continuing education program, which focuses on professional training and certification, particularly for non-traditional students who, and we're told across the Olympia region, there are 60,000 people with some degree, with some college and no degree, working in government, working in private industry, who with certificate short courses that are stackable, courses where their professional and experiential engagement will be recognized for credit. That program we're launching this fall, we're working on it as we speak. So that's the work we're doing. And I invite you to be partners with us in making sure Evergreen Olympia, Evergreen Tacoma, Evergreen with its focus on Native American studies not only remains, but grows and become even a more vibrant institution in the next 50 years. Thank you.
If we go back to full screen, that would be great.
That's me.
So Dexter, wonderful, wonderful presentation. Let's give Dexter a nice round of applause for this wonderful in-depth look at what Evergreen offers this community and the community abroad. And I must say that I am a very happy parent of two daughters who have graduated from Evergreen, one from Evergreen Tacoma and the other from Evergreen Olympia. So thank you, thank you, thank you for your presentation and uplifting of Evergreen. And now it's time for questions and comments. If you would use the icon in the reactions area there, I'd appreciate that. I'll be able to see you better. And once you've asked a question or made a comment, and if you'd like to ask a second question or make a second comment, we'll take those who have not had a chance first before I call on you a second time. And we have two hands up already.
If I may.
Oh, I forgot. Yes.
If I may just jump in here, we had promised Norma.
That's right. That's right. Norma, welcome. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Yes, your 3 words.
The 3 words are light, and peace, and help and healing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see your face. Okay. I don't know if David had his hand up first or if Monty. Does it matter?
Monty, go ahead.
Okay, Monty, and then David.
Okay, I mean, David, are you sure? Okay, I'll go first. So, yeah, thanks. And Dexter, thank you so much. And I first just want to acknowledge the generosity of yours telling your story and the arc of your getting to Tacoma, and just to kind of emphasize how singularly important story is to the conversation. And I think to the global conversation that wants to be happening. And story is sacrament. We look at one and we get to see all. So thank you so much. The second thing I kind of want to put myself in your story a bit. I looked at the Evergreen campus before it was the Evergreen campus, thinking what a wonderful piece of property this is in the center of the city. And when Maxine Mims lit up the neighborhood, I just bowed down in deep gratitude for her vision and the vitality of her presence. Yeah, just kind of want to acknowledge that long arc of kind of wondering and loving Evergreen, and also noting, as you're obviously aware, that the Evergreen campus in Tacoma is so different than the Evergreen campus in Olympia. And I hope you get a team that can do both, or 2 teams, one for Tacoma and one for Olympia, because the opportunities of convening and activism, I think, are so much different in the 2 cities. Anyway, that's my sense. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of place myself in your story at Evergreen here in Tacoma is that for the last 4 years, I've been a part of the Evergreen Mindfulness Project with Dr. McCurry, your math teacher on the Tacoma campus. And so while that mindfulness project has struggled, we continue to be kind of a part of the aspirational life of that campus, for which I am a grateful participant. So in some ways, what I kind of ask about may seem presumptuous, and so I hope I give myself enough authentication to push in. So Eve, I'm glad that you smile. Things I love how you went through the values of Evergreen, but some things I didn't hear are what I would like to just kind of put on the table, and you can either pick up or ignore as you like, Dexter. It may be that it's just not appropriate to address all these, but one of the things I didn't hear that is so critically important now is systems thinking, a systems view of life, and systems theory as woven into what Evergreen does. Evergreen talks about interdisciplinary studies, but the world of systems view in systems theory is in some ways the updated version of interdisciplinary studies. So I would be, yeah, anyway, I just noticed that missing. I noticed missing I see student learning, but I don't see lifetime learning about living in democratic processes and participating around in the values of democratic processes. So, I mean, the other thing that is so, I think, so obvious this week is, we have a Supreme Court that has elevated the Second Amendment, and a Supreme Court that has elevated the rights of fundamentalist religion over the individual rights of women's choice. We have a huge era of really politicized oppression. So there's a question for me, is like, how does a small, fleet-footed university like Evergreen look at that and talk about a new vision for new times? And while I hear it in your heart, I didn't see the language for that. And then the other thing that I'm curious about is both local and global collaboration. So, and I'm looking at the Tacoma campus. I mean, it's like, it is such a stellar place for convening and being an engine of conversation, an engine for things like reparations and, talking, and as it's been in the past. COVID really cut all our institutions off. But anyway, that sense of local collaboration and global collaboration. And I just wonder if you're looking at some of the, well, I have a big affection for the online access that MIT gives to lifetime learners, and especially the work of the Sloan School of Business and the Presencing Institute and all the work that they've done around systems there. So I just wonder if you're looking at any of those larger collaborations. I think that the West Coastness and the need for bi-coastal conversations is a part of what wants to happen in our country, partly as a way to knit people together. Anyway, I'm so sorry if I took too much airtime. Eve, thank you for your lovely smile. I will now mute myself and be quiet. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. So Dexter, your response.
Sure. So, Monty, thanks for those questions and those probes. As I indicated at the outset, this is me telling you about my journey to Evergreen and giving you a sense of the beginning of my engagement with Evergreen. Working at my level, a new person would be expected to have a honeymoon period of maybe 2 years to get to know the systems, to work with the systems. I told the people at Evergreen that I've shortened that to be my first year where I would be all ears and notebooks, questions, taking notes, listening carefully. And I did not get the privilege of a year. I had to plunge right in, right from the beginning. So we're right at the beginning. And we in education are on the cusp of some major changes the fastest growing universities are now the ones that allow for asynchronous learning and learning online. At the same time, that's a different kind of education from in-person small liberal arts institution. If we were to take the time, Monty, to look at the 5 foci and 6 expectations, and if we were to go further, as we might on another occasion, to look at the 12 or 13 paths, you would see, as you hinted, that integrative learning is the learning that helps us to understand systems thinking, because integrative learning is learning that says we live with and in systems, and it's always important to look at the multifaceted nature of the systems, the institutions, the organizations, the workplaces, the communities, the relationships with which we live. So, for example, when you talk about reparations, we've talked on and off about reparations here, proposed in Congress over 40 years now. And this year is the first time we see some significant movement that suggests that we could get to legislative action on reparations. One of the arguments against reparation was an economic argument. And it is because we have now connected the historical argument with the economical argument, where there are clear calculations about how much is owed and to whom it is owed, that we can now knock down some of the objections. Some of the objections to reparations were, how are we going to pay? Who is going to pay? To whom do we make these payments? What is reasonable? Are we talking about giveaways, or are we talking about monies owed to real people? That kind of calculation comes out of integrative studies, comes out of an understanding of the discussion of reparations as having its grounding in plantation economies, having its grounding in historical inequities, having its grounding in economic realities of plantation society functioning to provide significant outcomes and benefits for owners and nothing for the workers who provide the products that emerge from plantation societies, whether it's cotton, rice, sugarcane, or any of those other crops. So that's one piece. The second piece is I have worked significantly with Dean Tate Arunga, and I will continue to work with the Evergreen campus to address some of the historical challenges of the relationship between Olympia and Tacoma. Those relationships are critical, and there are parts of that relationship that Evergreen has not handled well. And I have done a lot of work in mending those fences, sorting those relationships, helping to reestablish Evergreen Tacoma to the levels that Maxine Mims and Joy Hardiman and others brought it to. including the pandemic, Evergreen Tacoma has declined in enrollment significantly. And we're just now, with the good work of Dean Tate Arunga, we're just now beginning a turnaround project. So lots of work being done on the ground, Marty, and a strong and clear recognition that Evergreen Tacoma is very different from Evergreen Olympia. And one of my challenges is to mark that difference for its value, while at the same time challenging that difference so that we can benefit from both.
Thank you, Dexter. David.
Thank you, Eve. Dexter, I very much appreciate you sharing about your background and how you got eventually to Evergreen. And I must say that I think you're the right person in the right place at the right time to help, to work with Evergreen, as I know you. And I didn't, with some of what you were sharing, a good amount of what you're sharing, I didn't know, I learned quite a bit today. And I'm very impressed with the whole, so much of the emphasis on diversity, inclusion. And it brings to mind some questions I had, and I'm just going to ask one basic one. If I have time later, I'll ask others, but I don't, well, my question basically is how do you see Evergreen turning this around as far as reducing the cost of college, the cost of going to higher education? And as a state college, I'm curious about that. I understand how if say at UPS or some other POU, it seems to me there could be ways to wouldn't be as difficult to discern about how that could be done. But the state college, I'm really curious and interested in what your thoughts are about how you want to help, how you're going to help reduce the cost, which I think is really, really important, terribly important, and I really want it to happen, and to incorporate these programs at Evergreen that other places don't have, and the philosophy and that. So that's my question, my comments, and my question.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your comments. I'll begin my response to you with an anecdote. When I was teaching at the University of Puget Sound, dealing with a particular subject, I wondered aloud in front of my students. In fact, I told them that some people in the community have asked me, why are you not teaching at a historically Black college? And I was shocked by the response of my students. They almost cheered. They're like, yes, that's what you should do. And they were saying that in an affirmative way, meaning we really believe that your contribution would be really, really celebrated and appreciated, because they knew that at Puget Sound, it was a fight to get these things to be accepted as part of the academic program. I'll give you one quick example. experiential learning, engagement in the community. It's only about 4 or 5 years ago that Puget Sound began to embrace that. In African American studies, as we developed the program as early as 2010, I proposed that every student should be given an opportunity to study abroad or in the community beyond the campus. And at the time, the thinking was, we can't afford it. Now, almost every college has to be offering that to remain competitive. So just to give you those practical pieces. But how, David? One, I want to make it clear, my position is that education should be available the way it's available in many European countries. That if you are part of the state, you have access to education, a range of opportunities, whether it is through what we understand to be traditional college with liberal arts and the humanities, or through training that includes technical education and technical training, but that there is an acknowledgement that educating a person to age 18 or age 19 is not sufficient for our society. So college should not have this cost. That said, here we are. So how are we going to deal with it? I say public-private partnerships. There are very few college students who pay full cost. The cost for a year at the University of Puget Sound is somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000. The cost at Evergreen is $25,000. And that we're talking about full cost, including housing. So Evergreen is the most affordable by far. There, David, you should know, you may be pleased to know, there's a robust conversation going on about within the context of how do we make college more accessible. One, it needs to be more affordable, but within the context of what we have now, where private, especially small private liberal arts colleges, to be competitive, they have to discount. So you will see the cost, but then they have to discount it. So the competition between a private liberal arts and an Evergreen. Evergreen offers a scholarship that, let's say we offer $10,000 scholarship. Elsewhere, they are having to offer $20,000, $25,000. It may seem like more on its face, but our scholarship may be 50% of the cost, whereas there are scholarships that are 1/5 or 1/6 of the cost. So there is helping through scholarships, and then there's the big issue of helping students navigate the available scholarships. One of the most difficult things dealing with getting into college is, how do I deal with the many pieces, my FAFSA, that includes Pell Grants, then private loans, then individual scholarships. When I was doing my graduate degree, I got through college purely on scholarships. If there was a scholarship for $500, I'm going after it. For $100, I'm going after it. But it took a lot of work. And in the United States, as an international student, the numbers were limited. You have to search the sites, search for where you qualify, and it's hard work. So we're working on two fronts. How do we make the information more available, more manageable, more accessible? And how do we work to keep the cost down? We at Evergreen are working to make sure we manage the cost as much as possible. So for example, with respect to housing, which is a big deal, we have a big challenge at Evergreen right now. We're using about half the amount of housing we have, but that's because the majority of the housing we had was built at the beginning of the 70s, and some of it desperately needs upgrading. So to a student who gets into Evergreen, gets housing, the issue of credit score is not a part of our consideration. Anything to do with first down payment, or first month's down payment, those are all part of the housing reality of people. Those we have eliminated. So we work intentionally to live into our mission in those ways.
Well,
Thank you,
thank you,
David.
Dexter. That really helps me understand. I really agree with your philosophy about educating ourselves. Education is educating ourselves, investment in ourselves, and that shouldn't put a person on debt.
Megan? Megan?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. I really appreciate this conversation. It's really fun to think about Evergreen. And I'm sure you already know this, but I'm an Evergreen graduate. I got my undergraduate degree in 1999 from the Evergreen Olympia campus. And so it's so fun just seeing the pictures. I haven't been on campus in so long, but I remember I was around when the Longhouse was built, actually. And and my graduating class was the year that Mumia Abu-Jamal spoke as our graduation ceremony speaker. And I worked to help make that happen. And anyways, so I want to say that in my view, Evergreen is in a very strong position to meet the needs of today's young people. And, I'm thinking about it during this conversation, and then I just trying to kind of get inside of their experience, right? So my son is college age. He does not want to go to college. We have college savings for him. He's able to. He had a really poor experience in the public school system. And I think about young people these days and some of the factors that have influenced their lived experience of schooling compared to what those of us who are older experienced. School shootings, the drills, that's actually a big cultural factor that kids and teachers live with now, and it creates a less safe feeling atmosphere. The George W. Bush era testing stuff that never went away. The teachers had to make changes in their curriculum to match these testing requirements, and that's never been deleted. Young people are still facing that. I have elementary school clients who are just been doing testing the past couple of weeks, and their whole schedule gets changed around during the testing, and teachers are under this pressure and had to throw away parts of their curriculum that were more alive and creative in order to make more space for teaching to that testing. And I think about their foreshortened sense of future, in looking at the high level of chaos and climate change. And, that college is a very hopeful thing, isn't it? It's about creating this brighter future for yourself. And so I think that Evergreen has some really big strengths compared to a lot of other universities in terms of it's non-traditional. That setting, totally different from the public school experience. And that's something that can really be played up. It's affordable, like you were saying. That's the other big factor that young people face, and for people who went to college in the 70s or 80s or even the 60s, it was totally a different experience. People did not have these shackles of debt that they carry around, and that really pulls people under. And it's a reason why. And people who are non-ideal candidates, not part of that 5 or 10% that the fancy schools want. They have often ended up enrolled in the options that they have are more predatory, right? Schools that are for profit, who they come out of it with a lot of debt and either a degree that's not usable or without a completed degree. And young people see that, right? So Evergreen being affordable, and also to bring in these non-ideal students, right, with that aren't part of that 5 or 10%, but be non-predatory and not be a scam, give something that's genuine and substantial. That is a niche that is really needed for young people. And I think you're right in focusing on the other piece is prospective students seeing a practical use for that, in their future for their degree. And that's the piece that I think could be further clarified, right? Because of the expense and because of just this storyline that maybe they're not, a degree isn't the best thing that's gonna, benefit somebody's future. I'm sorry, I'm telling you my ideas because that was my sense, is that you came to this going, give me your idea. So I'm just saying all these ideas, and there's not a great question in there. But I think that it's finding ways to connect with what's empowering and culturally relevant for young people these days. And one thing I loved about Evergreen, and I still love the idea of it, is that full-time program that has these different elements, and they're all cohesive, right? They're all organized along a theme. And maybe there's a way to have think about within that theme, where's the cultural relevance for a young person, and where's the practical, the piece where they have a sense of this is concretely useful towards making a living, right? I'm sorry, there's no question in there at all. I appreciate you, Dexter. I love it that you're there, and I love what you all are doing. And when I went to Evergreen, it was much smaller. Like they were actively expanding at that time. And you're saying it's 50% of what it was. And I'm thinking, well, that sounds probably like it was the same size as when I went there. And they made do with that, right? I mean, they of course wanted to expand, but they survived like that for many years.
Thank you, Megan. I did not know you were a Greener grad. That is wonderful. And thanks for your words of affirmation. It is true, and hopefully most people on here know by now that Evergreen, born as an experimental college, at the end of the 60s, that moment of ferment when there was a sense of great possibilities for change, and for some it was a moment of chaos as people raised their voices against the Vietnam War, as African American, then women, then Native Americans made their voices heard loud and clear in the public square. And this was the age of checking out checking out of the rat race, checking out of mainstream society, and Evergreen stepped in as an institution that was not going to be beholden to old ways of doing things. And right from its beginnings, it was challenged and it was questioned. And throughout its life, it has survived because it has had champions. There are people who have always wanted to shut down Evergreen because it represents an opening to the unwashed masses, that people don't want to be involved in education at this higher level. So it is true, Megan, that we're always trying to figure out what's the right size, what's the best way to go forward. I personally wish I had known about Evergreen when my son was college age, because he went to Puget Sound and he didn't want to sit in a classroom. And had I known about Evergreen, that's where he would have gone. Because when you hear about the Evergreen programs where students get to, we don't have it right now, but students would go on a boat and all of their courses was related to living and working in that kind of environment. So they would do environmental studies. They would study biology. They would study the necessary mathematical calculations for piloting and surviving. So that's Evergreen's strength. And our challenge is to find a way to translate it to the generation we're looking at. Megan, you're right. I've come to this group to say, toss me your ideas, but most significantly, my request is help us recruit students, traditional and non-traditional students, because one of the historical ways of framing Evergreen is to say Evergreen is not for everyone. It's for unique kinds of students. I want to change that narrative and change it to say what Evergreen has proven is that the Evergreen way of education that begins with where people live and allows them to learn in ways that reflect their everyday experience. That's the way learning should take place. And more traditional schools have acknowledged it. They're now calling it high impact practices. What are those? Experiential learning, undergraduate research, study abroad, students reflecting on their knowledge and writing about their knowledge, interdisciplinary studies. Those are what are being identified as high impact. That's what Evergreen has been doing. And that's what those of us who believe in this kind of dynamic connection between community and colleges, we've been promoting with some vicious pushback over the years. When we did our community partners forum in race and pedagogy and as part of African American studies, the dean would constantly ask us, what about the Puget Sound classroom? And Grace Livingston and I, time and time again, would go in and would say, this is the classroom. This is the classroom extended. The classroom is not 18 and 19-year-olds sitting by themselves, separate from the world, with having a limited number of questions. The classroom is those 18 and 19-year-olds sitting with veterans, sitting with community people, sitting with people dealing with everyday problems, And then the questions get more complex and more interesting, and the dynamics of a classroom change radically. That's the Evergreen way, and that's what others are picking up now. So help me recruit students to that while we work on making that connection to say what we help to create at Evergreen is students who are entrepreneurial in their thinking. So that entrepreneurial, creative, innovative thinking can translate to earnings, and it can translate to more robust democratic societies. That's the engagement at Evergreen. Pam's hand has been up for a while.
We have Pam, and then we have Diana. And then I will turn it back over to you, Dexter. It's about 2:54.
Right.
So Pam, and
If we
then
can do
Diana.
these quickly, then we can allow for Eve's question, because I know you have one that you're suppressing there.
Hi, I thought I was the third one after Megan. So whoever that's first can go ahead.
Go ahead, Pam.
But okay, thank you. So okay, my background is in I'm a graduate of UW actually. In this, I was educated in the mid 70s. Graduated in 1980, so I'm that generation. And at that time, I cannot talk about anything about scholarships and stuff because I was a foreign student, so it was not any financial aid were not inclusive of us. So I cannot talk about that. But and I've lived here in this area for 30 some years, and I only come across several a handful of Evergreen students, graduates, and they are very quiet, and they're and I feel like they are a gem in this area, in the Northwest. We desperately need that kind of people to be amongst us. That's one thing. The what Dexter you had mentioned or you talked about just now makes me think of a regular public high school education as opposed to homeschoolers. So with homeschoolers, they are thrown into their own living and then try to learn everything that is to improve their own living, to improve their own ideas and philosophy in life. And that is a very different kind of people. And my nephews were homeschooled, and they're very great because there's a one characteristic in those students that are very nice. I feel like they're gems to our society. But anyhow, so that's another thing is. I think, Dexter, you have a very, very tough job to recruit students for Evergreen, knowing that the general public, like in Seattle, I'm in Seattle. So in Seattle, a lot of the high tech companies already have been, pushing out programs, 2-year programs, even 1-year programs for coding, and the kids come out with huge salary, huge salary jobs. So that is hard to compete. So you have a tough job. So I believe you mentioned that there are money that going into your programs recently, and I would think that to use that money wisely, it would be to go into a lot of rehab programs, short-lived rehab, 2-year rehab programs, so something like that. Yeah, and then to reinforce that would be a strong job placement program afterwards. So the highly endowed universities, that's what they have, placement programs, department that place students in jobs. And you guys are so close to Olympia. Those kids with that kind of high ethical levels, standards should go into Olympia, I think. That's just an aside. Um, with what philosophy, pedagogy philosophy you have, maybe you can appeal to international communities, to other countries, to recruit international students, and because that is how they like to see as soft power, instead of high tech, because a lot of places already have high tech. Not so much the African countries, but Asian countries, they have high tech already. So they would value that soft power education. So that's another idea. And that's about all I have to say, I think. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Pam. All great ideas: internships, job placements, students interning in government. All of these are areas we're looking at. There's some computer programming at Evergreen that we're looking to shore up. So yes, you are absolutely right. And I mean, these many ideas tell me we probably have to come back and have some more conversations about these.
Diana? You're muted, Diana.
I said I was a 1990 graduate of Evergreen, and the theme then was strength and diversity, let the voices be heard. At the time I was going to Evergreen, I was working as a counselor / nurse at Child Study and Treatment Center. And just before the pandemic hit, I met one of the clients or students was there, and she was, I hadn't seen her in almost 20, 30 years. And she was going to Evergreen. She was 30-some, and she graduated. So I just want to say that sometimes the influences of my education at Evergreen influenced that 10-year-old girl who just graduated from Evergreen. So the education I received was an education in terms of really developing my inner self, which I think also helped me in terms of my work with the clients or the kids at child studies. So maybe you can find some more students from child study to go to Evergreen. So anyway, quickly, that's kind of the influence of my education at Evergreen and how they influence other people in our lives. Some of my other relatives also attended Evergreen, nieces and stuff. So anyway, it grows from the experience.
Thanks, Diana. And
you're welcome.
Ways that we can get the Evergreen message out there, I welcome any of that, because what we hear from Evergreen students and Evergreen graduates very often is, we were told college is not for us, or we didn't think college was for us. And the story of Evergreen is that Evergreen is there. It's accessible. We will work with you. We'll work deliberately with you and get you from where you are to where you need to be.
All right. Thank you.
So, Dexter, I don't have really a question, but what I do want to say is that your happiness is so evident. And the smile, really tells it all. And I'm just so happy for you that you have found a place that really, really appreciates what you bring and offers your brilliance to be expounded upon. And so I'm just thrilled for you. I guess if I do have a question, how do we bring, how can we maintain race and pedagogy? Well, they are maintaining race and pedagogy at UPS, and also bring that to Evergreen. I mean, how can RPI be used usefully in both places, if that's even possible?
Good question. And Eve, I love the way you care for me by giving me wonderful outs. So you asked this big question when there's no time to answer. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I didn't think you could answer it in depth.
Well, here's the thing. I can smile now. A year ago, 6 months ago, I couldn't even smile about that question. It was such a painful question. But in all seriousness, it is the issue that my colleagues and I at Puget Sound will have to address. And Evergreen would love to have the program or something like it. And where I am, I'm going to work. And so you can expect to see evidence of my work at Evergreen. How we negotiate race and pedagogy is something we're going to have to attend to with creative focus, because there's a hard question: who owns this entity? I built it with my lifeblood of 20 years of everyday commitment beyond what anybody could ask. So nobody can really, in good faith, claim this as belonging to the University of Puget Sound.
Fair enough.
So
fair enough.
So there we go.
Yeah. And you bring RPI with you in spirit. It'd be great to see.
We'll find.
Structure. We'll see.
We'll find a way.
Okay.
I think Peter dropped something in the chat. Thank you, Peter. I don't know if you want to say it, but thanks very much.
So let's give Dexter a nice warm round of applause for this presentation. Thank you. Gives us so much to think about. And I'm an ombuds person for Evergreen since my younger daughter graduated in 2007, and I'm just root for Evergreen all the time. So just know that there are people rooting for Evergreen every day. Okay, and we'll turn it back over to you, Dexter.
All right, thank you so much, Eve. Thank you. You've been just such a wonderful set of conversationalists today. I love our time together. Thank you very much.